Hi, everyone. Welcome. So, peace and powerful greetings, family. Welcome to another transformative episode of Uncovering Hidden Healing. So, this is the place where we dive into ancient wisdom, sacred practices, and spiritual technologies that reconnect us to our power. So, I'm your host, Arletha Lizana, founder of Sable Women Incorporated. And this series is made possible through partnership with Morehouse School of Medicine and Prometra International. So each week, we explore a different path to healing because our ancestors understood healing wasn't one dimensional, it was emotional, physical, energetic, and cosmic. So today, we are stepping into one of the most profound cosmic languages, sacred geometry. What if love, healing, and connection isn't random? What if they are divinely patterned into the universe itself? So today we uncover how to understand sacred geometry, how to understand how sacred geometry can unlock deeper emotional connection, spiritual alignment, and soul healing. So to guide us in this sacred conversation, I'm honored to welcome Anne Marie Pizzaro, a spiritual guide, intuitive healer, and founder of Body Energy Connection. She is a visionary entrepreneur and a spiritual guide with over 15 years of experience, blending her background in nursing with her expertise in the Akashic Records to help individuals tap into their intuition, heal, and align with their soul's purpose. As the founder of Body Energy Connection, she offers transformative coaching, Akashic Records readings, and holistic healing. Anne Marie also creates sacred spaces for spiritual growth through her courses, workshops, and mystical products like go to journals. Her holistic approach empowers others to manifest positive change and live in alignment with their highest potential. She blends science, spirit, and structure into a unique transformational journey, showing us that sacred patterns are not just concepts, they are living, breathing forces shaping our lives. So, Anne Marie, welcome so much to Uncovering Hidden Healing. We are so excited to have you.
Oh, thank you so much, Arletha. It is such an honor and pleasure to be here. This is one of my favorite topics in the world. So, thank you for having me on your show.
No, thank you. I'm so excited. But let's go ahead and just jump right in. So, we already started talking, so I feel good energy. So, let's begin by grounding us. So, in your words, what is sacred geometry and how does it show up energetically in healing, love, and life? What is it?
Wow. We just dive right in, don't we?
Dive right in. Like, what are we talking about today?
Well, I find that sacred geometry is actually tied to the building blocks of all matter. And oftentimes, when we talk about geometry as just shapes, there is this understanding of where it's applied in physical arenas like architecture, engineering, physics, and all different areas of science. But when you blend it with spirituality, then you start to work with these properties of geometry that have a much more multidimensional quality. So when we're talking about sacred geometry, not only are we talking about the building blocks of matter, we're talking about pure potential, and we're also talking about source language. When I started to study sacred geometry, they talked about source or spirit, the creator, as the original geometer. And the original geometer started off as the circle. So when we conceive of this Big Bang theory, what really I see that is this original circle, when it decided it wanted to experience form, it replicated itself in that bang of one becoming two, which appears very much like the Vesica Pisces, then began what we would call replication. And we see geometry appearing in genetics, in life, in the structure of nature, because what we're looking at is the language of creator and how it's continued to proliferate itself through each and every single being that's ever come through earth in a geometric form of numbers. So this is where I see we've got these encodements around patterns, contracts that we've made, how we're even structured. And when we allow ourselves to get into beautiful geometrical places and spaces, for example, like nature, it actually is a recalibrating tool because it reminds us who we are at our very core.
Absolutely. Wow. Thank you for that. That's like so many things are running through my head. The first thing I like just popped in my head was just like plants. And you know how plants like have different, patterns and things like that. So you were talking about like when we see, things in nature, how that it should kind of take us back, to the original, the circle. So I thought that was really important. But, tell us, how do you work with people? You spend so many years helping people align with their soul's purpose. So how do like the sacred patterns influence like our emotional bodies, our relationships, our healing journeys, our lives?
Gosh, wow, what a very complex question.
Yeah.
And I want to address it in terms of how I help people as it's related to sacred geometry.
Okay.
Because in my own practice, what I always create at the very beginning of my day is a sacred geometrical grid. So I activate this grid, which often becomes what we call an activated octahedron.
Mhm.
Because of that phrase, as above, so below, I want to
That's
make
right.
sure I create a protected container that is really operating from the highest and best good of people. When I work with people in the healing space of the Akashic Records, the geometries will sometimes appear when we're looking at something as simple as like the Metatron's cube. Sometimes their guides will bring in a concept of using sacred symbols to supercharge either their home, their
Mhm.
intentions, their even their health. So when you look at different types of sacred symbols, then you can actually align that to the journey that you're on. Let's
Right.
talk about the seed of life, for example. We started off talking about the geometer when it first replicated and became from 1 to 2, and then 2 became 4, and then 8. And as it continued these replicating cycles, it allowed form to become more complex and more dense. So when somebody is working with their seed of life, I would ask them to consider what are those 8 key elements that make up who you are in terms of, say,
Mm.
your chakra systems,
Yes.
and really address these 8 elements of who you are that brings you into a state of wholeness. From there, when you go into a place of, I want to create something in my world, whether I want to create a relationship, I want to create a business, I want to create more financial prosperity, and that's when we would work with, say, the Metatron's cube, because the Metatron's cube brings you what we call the building blocks of matter. So when you have the building blocks of matter that you can apply energetically to any project, it gives you a greater sense of connection to divine knowledge, that you don't have to know everything to be able to get something done. You just have to be willing to initiate and be open to respond. So what's really been amazing, Arletha, is some of these sacred symbols that I've seen that have shown up in nature, that have shown up in written and holy texts, are also found in sacred places all over the world, a lot of them in Africa too.
That's right.
So
That's right.
it's an imprint, I feel, of the creator giving us the sign that we've always been connected.
That's right. Wow, that's wow, so much. So many things are running through my head. So this is just wonderful in this conversation. So, I mean, you also work deeply with the Akashic Records. So, the blueprint of the soul. So maybe explaining, what the Akashic Records are, and then like how you see sacred geometry reflected in as you read the records. Like how do patterns show up in like a soul story, for example.
Wow, that is so incredible. That's you just love to bring the complex, don't you?
I told you it's like it's really I have so many questions. I love to learn. So I'm like asking all of these questions that I've been thinking about.
Yeah. Well, I love this question about
Mhm.
how geometry and the Akashic records are energetically related, because when the geometer, the original circle, decided to incarnate into multiple form, it went from 1 circle to 2 circles, and then from 2 circles to 4 circles. And that's in a way how human life began. But when that first replication started, a record was created of that experience. So
Mhm.
every time the creator replicates itself into every individual form, the geometries, the histories, the biography of that soul is encoded in the records.
Mhm.
And when we see what the Akashic records are, it's an intangible place that's in a form of light. So it's actually what I call Source's supercomputer, or the library of knowledge. And because the library of knowledge is encoded with data from multiple lifetimes and multiple timelines, these need to actually be very, very tiny. So they're in light. And so when people think we're going to a library, that's their human mind creating a
That's
concept
right.
for them to understand, because their light self, their geometric self that is actually encoded to be connected to this plane, already knows it has access to, it already knows it's a part of that.
Mhm.
What I've seen often in sessions with people is the record keepers will often reflect how their life is like a spiral.
Mhm.
Spiral, in a way, is as closely tied to sacred geometry because we're looking at the Fibonacci spiral.
Mhm.
So when we look at the Fibonacci spiral, and the spiral first starts off as a really tiny loop, and then it gets bigger and it gets
Mhm.
bigger and bigger, you can actually cut that Fibonacci spiral image into different sections and break down those different sections. And what you'll find is that when a soul is born, they're often on the outer part of the spiral. So long stretches of time happen as a
Mhm.
soul is developing things like the ability to walk, talk, think,
Mhm.
speak, read.
That's right.
So those years are often a lot longer in terms of what they're able to get, versus in those moments of your life where you make a decision, it shows up again in like a 24-hour span of time, and then you're on to the next thing. So I often see symbols like spirals that show up for people to let them know they're on the right path with their journey,
Mhm.
that they need to relax. I also see often symbols like pyramids, circles, the flower of life, because when we're shown what a soul looks like as a ball of light, they actually look like the flower of life.
Mhm.
Advanced souls tend to look like flowers of life,
Mhm.
whereas new souls tend to look like seed of life.
Wow.
The more a soul comes back, each time they come back, they get another circle that makes the whole thing much, much more complex. So
Mhm.
when we're looking at these geometries to understand their soul contract, it takes us away from polarity,
Mhm.
good versus bad, right
Mhm.
versus wrong, because there's an awareness that before the soul even incarnated, they got a chance to sit with their guides to create their soul's timeline. And part of this timeline is on a geometrical spectrum, like the Fibonacci spiral, that when
Mhm.
they choose to experience this, it accelerates them on that journey. I really hope we haven't lost your readers here.
Wow, no, it's like it's so much. I told you it's so much. It's like in my so two things. I mean, many things popped up, but two
Right?
things in particular. So, I studied the Dogon, and what they talk about is the way that the universe began. It was through a pole seed. So it's the tiniest seed. It's like a mustard seed. And it began, they said a whirlwind arose. So it started to move in a spiral and then created the universe. So a lot of African creation stories and creation stories just in general talk about that spiral. So that's, that came up and how that's the beginning of creation. And I always say, like, when I'm trying to do something in life, like, I have a goal or something I want to accomplish, that I have to kind of get velocity, escape velocity. I have to kind of move it so I can get it.
Totally.
Yeah, so I always think of it
Totally.
that way, It's easier for me, like, I'm like, okay, if you're working on something, you kind of spiral it out into the world.
Right. And
Um,
that's a good thought, because some people are very like outcome based.
yes.
Oh, this outcome could have gone better. I
Yeah,
could have done more.
yeah.
But when they look at the bigger spectrum of the journey, they'll realize that one thing they did was just a part of the whole thing, and they
That's
don't get tripped up on these things from the past that
that's
they
right.
think defines them.
That's right. That's right. And it's still a circular pattern. So there even may be more to do. Like, yes, you launched it, but there are you have this outcome, but there may be outcomes that you don't, like you said, you don't even see. Because I think about, like, when I create something, like at work or whatever, it might be the immediate outcome that's created, but all of the lives and people that it touched so it continues, but I just may not see that part.
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It also reminded me of Interstellar. So that's one of my favorite movies. I don't know if you've seen that one,
Mm.
but it has a library scene and it has like, this kind of concept, of, spiritual energy and things like that. So that's just a, another connection. But so Emery, like your work, it really beautifully bridges like science and spirit and intuition. So can you share like, your journey? Like how did you get from nursing
Yeah,
into Akashic Records? Like, how do they go together? Like, so what started you on this journey?
absolutely. Well, I think
Mhm,
that for all of us who deviate from our original professional
mhm,
path,
mhm,
there was always that agreement in the very beginning that I'm here to do something else. And I could tell, I knew that when I got into nursing, I was like,
mhm. Yep.
yeah, I don't want to do this. But I stayed in it for 18 years. And I
That's
did because I have a lot of family members who are nurses, and it's a very stable career.
right.
It
Mhm.
was the kind of stability that helped me to actually build a side business working as an Akashic Records reader. And what I found that was the great bridge between science and that spiritual work was I had to remember um, not to tell people what to do, but rather bring out their own
Yeah,
genius and brilliance.
that's right.
Very different when you're in the world of medicine. When you're a nurse, you're like, listen, you need to get out of bed, you need to
Yeah.
take your medicine, you need to do your physical
Right.
therapy.
Right.
But when you're working in potential, you're
Mhm.
looking at a soul's journey, then you have to offer it to them in the form of choice. These are all the different options that are available to you that then allows your soul's timeline to bridge. It took a lot of years for me to grow my confidence as a business owner and a
Mhm.
reader because that's not the skill set I started off with.
Right.
So it
Mhm.
actually took me a good 7 years of slowly building my business on the side and realizing that I could bring that validity coming from a science healthcare background because
Mhm.
when people would ask me questions about health, if it warranted them seeking professional help,
Yeah.
I'd be the very first person to tell you to go seek professional help.
Yeah.
I wouldn't just say, well, we're sensing some cold energy here. Therefore, you must be dealing with some kind of psychic drain. If
Yes.
we perceived this needs professional insight, then I would definitely explain that. I think
Mhm.
that that bridge between going from the professional to more of a spiritual world, that's why I actually ended up spending more time in the world of healthcare because I
Mhm.
needed to learn how to help people.
Mhm.
I needed
Mhm.
to learn how to really understand where people are coming from.
Mhm.
And in a 15-minute span of time, that's the span of time that you have to help people know, like, and trust you. Same
That's true.
thing when I'm working with people in readings is in that first 10 to 15 minutes, we have the opportunity for you to be established as a safe space to receive people and to also be able to show them how you could help them
Mhm.
without necessarily taking their power away.
That's right.
What I really have to honestly say, Arletha, is that the biggest difference was learning how to run a business.
Ah, yes. Yes.
That
Yep.
was a whole nother skill
That's a whole
set
other thing. That's right.
that a lot of practitioners, I feel, don't take into consideration when they learn a skill or a trade, or even coming out of the nursing world and you say, okay, I learned something now. What do I do with this? Who's going to give
That's
me the
right.
order on what to do next? I'm
That's
so
right.
used to following orders. What
Yep.
do I do? And I was like, wait, that means in my business, I'm the boss. I am
That's
the
right.
one that puts the orders. It took me time to actually learn how to run a business because doing the healings and the readings, that was the easy part.
That's right. No, that's totally right. I totally understand that. And it's
Yeah.
like that's the, hard part. It's funny because my niece Ariel and I we used to do a workshop. It was the spirit of healing, like a retreat, the spirit of business. I'm sorry. So this in the
Yeah.
spirit of business, it's like, teaching concrete business, how to run your business, also kind of combining like your own, getting your own spiritual house in order. And then I also look as a business as a spirit. So, so it's like all of these things that you really have to understand, about the business. It's not
Yes.
just like you said, the healing part and, all of that. It's also like, how does this become a business, to help people and to make money? A business is supposed to generate money, so yeah. So
Yeah.
how do you, get all of those aspects? And there's like the day-to-day things that need to be done, and as well as the spiritual things that need to be done. So it's so interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So when did you first like encounter like, sacred geometry, like, as a spiritual or a healing concept? Like when did that first started to come to you,
These symbols, I think the symbol that most resonated at a core heart level was the flower of life. And
Uh-huh.
the flower of life came to me in my early 20s because I was dating a young man
Mhm.
whose parents were hippies in the 60s. And they were really, really into a lot of sacred concepts.
Mhm.
So things like uh, The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life, Volume 1 by Drunvalo
Mhm.
Melchizedek.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Book really blew me wide open. And I didn't even understand it. At that time, my mind was like, I don't understand this concept. And that's the thing about sacred geometry. When we try to utilize logical, rational ways, there's something that we miss around the energy of knowing, caught
That's
knowing.
right. That's right. Mhm.
So there were two things that really pivoted my awareness of geometry. One was accessing these books and then starting to do some reading and discovering my own spirituality. And the second was when I first brought a plant into my home.
Mhm.
So I brought an ivy into my home. And I remember one morning looking at the ivy and realizing, oh, you're sentient.
Uh-huh. That's right.
You're sentient. And
Exactly.
I sat there for like an hour, just like staring at the leaves of this
Mhm.
plant. And
Mhm.
I think we had some kind of a communion,
Yeah.
but you can't put it into words, communion. The thing that also I would have
Mhm.
to say that awakened me to the power of geometries was when I was in my mid 20s. I went to Alaska, and I went to Alaska by myself, and I found myself on this hike with some girlfriends. And I remember getting a little bit lost.
Mhm.
I found myself in this forest that led to this circle of trees. And next thing I know, I'm just drawn to the circle of trees. I sit down and there's a stump. And this stump, let me tell you, it's like magically shaped like a chair. So I'm like, oh, well, hey, here's a stump waiting for me to sit on. And then I remember looking up and I could see this circle of the top of the trees coming together. And it was as if in that moment, the timing was just right. And it was like I could see like formulas running through.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
I'm like, what am I looking at here? And me trying to logically analyze it was standing
Yeah.
in the way of receiving it.
Yes. Yes. Mhm. I totally
So
understand it.
when we're working with geometry, sometimes
Yeah.
just being with it and
Mhm.
letting it emanate whatever it needs to, that's its medicine.
Oh, absolutely. I love how you put that, because I think that, for me, like when I see a symbol, like you mentioned, the flower of life, it's the symbol, it's talking, but if I try to like, okay, well, what does this mean? And does this have a special number? If I start, thinking about it too much, I lose it. So I love how you put
Yeah.
that, and how you first encountered that. So I mean, I think that, these symbols are in nature. Like you said, the plant really was the thing that kind of really helped you understand. You're like, oh, okay, I saw this nice flower life symbol. And then you saw the plant and how the plant was living and working and being, and you're like, oh, okay. So I think that they kind of give us like a code, like the symbol is a code and it helps us with our spirituality, our intuition, our brain, helps us understand it. So let's kind of talk more about like sacred geometry, love, and emotional healing. So, you know, when we think of love emotionally, we also describe it as energetic and structural. So, like, how do patterns work? Any sacred geometry that may work in terms of love and healing and all of that. What do you think about this subject in general?
Wow, this is a very complex situation because it's so interesting when I work with people in the Akashic Records and when they show that as two souls that carry a love contract. The symbol that shows up between them is the Vesica Pisces, which is the two circles with the overlap.
Mm-hmm.
But what's really interesting about that is the Vesica Pisces is most successful for two people who have worked on themselves and are bringing wholeness.
That's right.
Because when you're bringing wholeness, it actually increases the power of choice as the container to experience more love, more, more healing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I have seen, I've worked with sacred geometry for many years. I actually got trained in Mayan Aztec sacred geometry, which breaks down all the different symbols by colors, shape, and structures to what they even mean. So when people have reached out to me and they said, Anne, I would love for your help to make me a grid, a love grid, for example.
Mm-hmm.
This was a campaign I just did in February where we did an Akashic Love Vision Quest, very heavy in sacred geometry. Because once we get into the Sacred Heart space, a soul is taken into what looks like a pyramid or a tent.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're working inside of a pyramid, we're actually working with this shape that will help with transmuting what's inside and then transmitting the outcome out into the world.
Wow.
So when we went through a love vision quest, their guides would take them into the Akashic Records. They would be able to enter into this pyramidal tent where then their guides would create a multidimensional experience. So the multidimensional experience now has them with their shamanic guides going into a journey where there is a lot of healing, releasing, clearing as it's related to love contracts. But then we on a human to human level, physical level, we would start clearing those things out of their Akashic records. And as it clears it out of their Akashic records, it actually cleans up the geometries, because where a soul may have been stalled in their replication process because of either trauma, pain, or grief, now they're able to address it. They can take accountability for it. They can free themselves from that karma and continue to replicate. So in the end, when we create them a sacred geometrical grid, there's a sentence that runs through these different symbols that is encoded in their intention. So if a soul says, I would like to meet my beloved life partner by the end of, say, 2025, we arrange the geometries in a way so that as they're reading this and they're running this grid, that geometrical message is being sent out into the world that aligns them to that other soul. So it's like they're energetically casting a reel.
Yes.
Hooked to the right person, and they're slowly through the spiral bringing them in so that it's about aligning their timeline.
Wow. Ooh, that was a lot. Okay, this is great. This is good stuff. So does that, you were talking about like, emotional healing and just really relationship building and all of that. But what about like, is it related to like the heart chakra? So, a lot of people are learning about chakra. So kind of like explain, how that comes into play.
Well, when we talk about sacred geometry and emotional healing, what's really interesting about this is that we haven't brought up this concept yet of the light body. And so when we're talking about who we are as human beings, as geometrical structures, this meat suit, this body, this is encasing something that's extremely beautiful, which is our light body. Our light body is a geometrical shape. And so when we can tune the frequency of this geometrical shape so it can experience healing, that's when a soul truly transforms. So for example, if you were ill and you had some kind of malady or sickness, I would draw a Metatron's cube around a soul. I would put that soul's picture name in the center, and then with the 6 circles that surrounds a soul, which puts them in what we would call like a shape like a Star of David with the 6 circles. Each of these 6 circles, I would write just exactly what the soul needed to be able to heal. We're going to play with this. Let's say someone's dealing with cancer. Okay. Maybe one of those circles is forgiveness. They're harboring an anger or pain, which causes the stress inside to proliferate. So when we write this word forgiveness, now we're raising them to the frequency of forgiveness. When you write this intention that their body repairs itself. That's what's happening when you write that the body is replicating cancer out
Mhm.
instead of replicating to keep cancer in. It's
Mhm.
replicating and creating a new sequence that then turns off the
Mhm.
genetic replication. When you write that the soul is now repairing itself, revitalizing itself, has all the nutrients and resources available, it's matching the frequency of healed, it's matching, the God state of its original creation. And you
Mhm.
look at this every day, you put yourself in this energy every day, you're
Right.
matching the frequency of what you can become.
Mhm.
That's how I would apply sacred geometry to somebody if they were going through an emotional scenario, especially around healing love.
That's right. Wow. I mean, that's so powerful. You just went like way deep. And it's funny. So the next part, like I really wanted to ask you to kind of dive deep into your practice, but you already are there. So, continue. So,
Well,
you built all
here's
these
three
beautiful
things.
bridges. Yeah. So,
Here's three things that I love to do with sacred
yeah.
geometry. I know everybody gets stuck in traffic sometimes,
Uh-huh.
and there are different symbols. So when I took this training around Mayan Aztec sacred geometry, why that was actually so important for me to go through that is because I learned what these different shapes and symbols represented. So if I'm stuck in traffic, I'm like, oh man, no movement, we're stuck. Well, what is a color of movement?
Mhm.
Orange,
Mhm.
yellow, third chakra,
Mhm.
activity, movement. Second chakra, it's about flow, vitality, and life. I would sit there in traffic. I'd be driving. I wouldn't tell my husband this. And I would just tell myself, okay, let's emanate a let's emanate a yellow dodecahedron. Let's
Mhm.
make people do what they need to and get out of the way so I can get
Mhm.
through.
I know that's right.
I'm just literally thinking
Yeah.
yellow dodecahedron, yellow
That's right. Look,
dodecahedron,
I'm about to try that tomorrow. What?
like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
The second way that I use sacred geometry is when I went through my training for the Mayan Aztec sacred geometry. It was a very intensive training. The second section of it was around how you manage diseases,
Mhm.
you manage codes.
Yeah.
So I, in this very big book, is a list of all of these diseases and all of these codes that
Yeah.
are connected to them geometrically.
Yeah.
And so I read through all of those diseases. I had this computer flashing these codes to me as
Mhm.
I'm reading them out loud. Red triangle, yellow square, purple circle, green spiral. And it was a very intensive process. But what happened is it encoded me with this ability that when I would enter into a patient's room as a nurse,
Mhm.
I would look at their file and go, oh, you've got diabetes. Emanate the shape for diabetes. Oh, you've got heart disease. Emanate the shape for heart disease. Oh, you've got high blood pressure.
Yeah.
Emanate the shape for high blood pressure. Oh, you've got these other disorders. Emanate this.
Mhm.
Emanate this. Emanate this. I would have the greatest days ever.
Wow, I bet you did.
My phone at work wouldn't always be ringing, and I
Mhm.
and these were the tools that I actually used when I was working also in ICU. So I
Mhm.
would work with some really, really, really sick people in the ICU, in the ER, post surgery, and I would emanate these codes, and they would never
No.
know what was in the background
Yeah.
because that's part of how you help.
That's
But
right.
the last thing of how I really use sacred geometry, Arletha,
Mhm.
well, this is actually something I encourage people to consider because
Yeah.
this is a protection mechanism. We
Mhm.
talked about activating our light bodies, and there's something really powerful I've found with these two fingers.
Mhm.
And what I'll do is I'll actually say some protection
Mhm.
prayers, and I will actually draw
Mhm.
the Star of David around,
Mhm.
and then I will draw the Metatron's cube around the Star of David, making it a very complex shape. And
Mhm.
so when you're working with sacred geometry, you're working with light. So you can actually draw these symbols around you. And when you're drawing these symbols, it's activating this part of you who's in light. And when I say, hey, I'm protected
That's
wherever I go, I don't doubt that. It really works.
Wow, man, I love that. I love that. I mean, it's just this is wonderful. I can't wait to get in traffic. Like, okay, like I know I've never been asking to get in traffic, so now I'm gonna tell you that. But we have so many. We're starting to get questions already, so just open it up. Anyone else that wants to add questions to the chat, but I'll just start kind of asking them, as they come in. So we had one first. One said, "Hello from San Diego. Can you please state the book you mentioned again and any other books to learn more about sacred geometry?"
All right. Do you mind if I take a moment to pull these out for
No,
y'all?
please, yeah.
I'm right here in my office. So I've
Okay.
got some of these really awesome books available. That's so interesting because I have this one particular book that's like my go-to,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't see it at the moment, which is very interesting. It's almost
Somebody's using it. It's okay.
right. It's likely I put it out in the living room for my husband and I both look at it. So I would encourage people, if you're really interested in sacred geometry, to start reading The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life, Volume 1 and Volume 2 by Drunvalo Melchizedek. And this is also a really awesome book.
Uh-huh.
It's called Quadrivium. And this is such a beautiful book, you guys. It's like all these different things about sacred geometry, very, very complex. A lot of pictures. I'm a picture heavy kind of a girl.
Yeah, I'm a picture person.
So those would be the two books I would start off with. And because we talked about activating your Merkaba and activating your light body so that you could be a living geometrical being, I would encourage you to consider Living in the Heart by Drunvalo Melchizedek, which is a way to learn how to activate your Merkaba and light body.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. So let's see. Someone said, I'm so fascinated by what you are saying on manifesting and visualizing sacred geometry to affect what's going on in your present physicality, in your present physically. How did you come upon this revelation? Like, how did you start doing this?
Well, how I came about these revelations is I started working with the Akashic Records. And when I started working with the Akashic Records, it started to show me what my soul's work on earth in this incarnation was. And my soul's work is a culmination of all the different lifetimes of doing all this different type of work. So when they brought this knowledge of sacred geometry to me, I was really overwhelmed by it because I was like, I don't really understand this. And they said, great, why don't you let us show you how you've held this knowledge before? So honestly, it's been a process of remembering.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I like the way that you put that. That's important. It's a process of remembering. So another question is, how can I start recognizing sacred patterns in my own life? Like,
Ooh.
Yeah. That's
The first thing is to put your phone away. It's a major distractor.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, it pulls you away from observing what's around you, because if you just get real quiet, give yourself 15 minutes, just get quiet and observe what's in front of you. If you even just sit outside, you start to observe patterns around you.
Yeah.
If you give yourself the gift to go for a walk, you'll start to see how there's all these structures around you that actually rely on geometry in order to exist. You cannot have a house without a solid square foundation, a roof, all those things that are tied to mathematics and geometry. So it's all around you, but it's never going to speak louder than your own thoughts. Mm-hmm. So if your thoughts say, I don't understand this, that's the filter between you observing what's actually there for you to receive.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's right. Okay, so last question. Well, so now in case another one comes in, but for now it says, are there rituals or meditations that use sacred geometry to attract love or heal emotional wounds? And then is there one sacred pattern I can work with to heal heartbreak?
Oh my goodness, what a very deep.
I know.
Wow. I think I should have written this question
Okay,
down.
so yeah, it's the first part is are there any rituals or meditations that use sacred geometry to attract love or heal emotional wounds, and then specifically into heartbreak?
Well, let's talk about, first of all, rituals and patterns around
Mhm,
working with sacred geometry. I have grids out my home.
mhm,
Grids can be really small grids, and some of them support my entire home.
mhm,
So when I create a crystal grid, what's actually happening is I'm creating a geometrical structure in light.
mhm,
So what covers my office is an octahedron. What
mhm,
covers my home is a really big pyramid. And then I
mhm,
even cover my entire property. So when you create these grids, you're creating intentions for what you want the program to be. I'm programming this grid, that's shaped like a pyramid, that's shaped like an octahedron, to
mhm,
bring to me positive energy, healing, love, light. That would be honestly the easiest way to work with the ritual of creating something with sacred geometry that's visible for you to
mhm.
use
That's right. Mhm,
as a way to be able to provide healing. Part of the energy of looking at when two souls come together for a contract is to acknowledge that some contracts are for a time only. And when a contract is done, two souls that were once joined might separate.
mhm,
And that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It's allowing these two circles to separate so they can go on their merry way and they can continue to replicate separately from each other, because they're only meant to come in for a little while, create that experience, and then continue. But some
mhm,
people, they still feel the pain of
mhm,
that separation or that grief. So when it comes to healing from heart loss, I encourage people to put themselves inside of a sacred geometry pyramid.
mhm.
Okay. I have pyramids all over my home, like real structural pyramids. I
Yeah,
love them. And I
yeah.
didn't realize that I was a pyramid keeper until I had about like 12. I was like, wait, is this
Right,
amazing?
right.
Or
This is the thing, right?
who you are.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at how can I use a structure like a pyramid as a healing tool, it could be one of two ways. You could create an image of a pyramid, either physically or energetically, and then you can write your intention for what you want to heal inside. Because remember, the purpose of the pyramid is to energize and then transmit. So if you want to heal from something, write it in there. Similarly, if you want to attract something into your life, I would work with a pyramid, but also the octahedron, which is essentially a pyramid up and down. Because
Mhm,
receiving it from source, I want to receive a partner,
mhm,
and I want it to materialize on earth.
mhm.
So we're going to receive it and then complete it. So we're the bridge, actually, between the higher realms and the celestial plane. We're actually the geometric bridge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. One last question. How do we learn more about our own Akashic records and our connection to sacred geometry?
Wow, so deep. Well, there are a lot of different books out there available
Mhm,
on how to read the Akashic Records. There's a lot of videos, there's a lot of different teachers. And what I would encourage you to consider is to research the different teachers before you choose which path you want. You
mhm,
don't necessarily need a teacher to learn how to read your Akashic Records, but what I've found teaching people how to read the Akashic Records and also having gone through Akashic Record trainings was there were some things I was missing
mhm,
in terms of how do I actually receive and understand and deliver something that's light?
mhm,
How do I understand this through my intuition? Because is it me saying these things? Am I making these up? Are these
mhm,
my thoughts or is this coming from somewhere else? That question took about 3 years for me going back and forth before I realized, okay, who I am, how I think is very different from what I receive as a reader. So I would encourage you to research, first of all, watch some videos, practice really using your intuition, and know this is safe. I want to put this out there. This is safe for you to know your own soul's blueprint, okay?
Yes. Yes. I think that's one thing. I'm glad you said that it's safe because I think sometimes people think that things are outside of them and they don't want to, it's like they're afraid to work within themselves, you know? So, even just practicing your intuition is really important. Like that doesn't have to do with anybody else. It's you just learning how to sit and listen and hear, So I think, thank you for saying that. I think that's
Oh,
really
absolutely.
important.
After having just run a 2 week long intuition boot camp,
Mhm.
it was really surprising to me where so many people were coming from around their relationship with their intuition. I kept repeating through the 2 weeks, this is as easy as breathing. This
Yes.
is as easy as your heart beating. This is an innate part of you. But then people would say things like, well, I suppressed my intuition. I
Mhm.
deny my intuition. I'm actually not connected to my intuition. So the
Mhm.
words that we say about ourselves and our connection actually determines how close we are to it. So if you say
Mhm.
you denied it, I just don't understand. I mean, I respect that you say that, but
Mhm.
it's like telling yourself, well, I deny myself breathing. Okay,
Exactly.
try that until one moment you go, because
Right.
it's literally your body's innate survival mechanism. That's why you have intuition. That's part of your innate survival mechanism. If you see a car coming to you, you're not just going to stand there. Your intuition is going to trigger the fight or flight, and you're going to move,
That's right.
right?
That's absolutely. Yep. So thank you. Thank you. So everything that you've shared today really reminds us that sacred geometry isn't just something we just observe, it's something that we live. So I remember I'm going to talk a little bit just really quickly about the spirit boxes. So I created these spirit boxes like about 8 years ago. It's been a minute. And it was like I was trying to figure out a tangible tool to really help anchor like love, protection, abundance, healing, and creativity like into everyday life, and I was guided by sacred geometry. Like I had a dream, a long time, that kind of started this. So
Yeah.
I think the first one I created was the Spirit of Love box. And I think I like kind of talked to you initially about it. And you're like, yes, stay with that sacred geometry. This is important, so the box shape, it was important. So the Spirit of Love box is, meant to like amplify love, relationships, heart chakra energy. So not only trying to attract someone or a relationship, but also working on yourself, your own self-love is really important, so and they're not like just decorative items, they're living, breathing, energetic tools, just like the pyramids you just held up. I think people need to understand it's not just a nice thing that sits on your shelf. This is energy that you could work with. And so, just really quickly, excited to announce that all of our Sable Women boxes are 50% off now through the end of the month while supplies last. So, thank you for that. And, today's conversation around love and sacred geometry is so important, so check it out. Check out our Spirit of Love box. And just, check out the other boxes too. They're pretty good, but, all inspired by sacred geometry. So, well, Anne Marie, before we close, can you share, a little bit about like how people, what you do now? So what you do, what's your life look like? What are you doing now? And then like how people can stay connected to your incredible work.
Well, I got to tell you, this whole journey of sacred geometry,
Mhm.
if I had a chance to have seen how my life would unfold in that spiral journey, I would have relaxed. I really would have relaxed, Arletha.
Yeah. Yeah.
There were moments when I was working as a nurse that I would think, this is never going to happen. I'm going to be stuck
Uh-huh.
in this job forever. But
Yeah.
I knew that that was the part of me that wasn't believing the higher purpose. So I actually retired from nursing in 2016, and I work full time in my business, Body Energy Connection. And I primarily do Akashic Record readings. I train people to become readers. We also started to get higher level work in the Akashic Records, where we started to change
Mhm.
our contracts, our soul stories in the Akashic Records. So much of this is working into changing our geometrical nature,
That's right.
helping us really attain a higher level of our crystalline nature. So this is what I'm doing now. I'm recently just started a 9-week journey training people to become an Akashic Records guide. And this is something that I teach twice a year. And nothing gives me greater pleasure than helping people achieve great success in their lives. That's what I'm here to do. And if geometry is a way that we can amplify and accelerate that, boy, let me tell you, let's make that happen because nothing gets us closer to our love relationship with spirit than actually acknowledging that we've always had our original love contract with the divine.
That's right. I love that. Thank you. This is wonderful. It's been so great. So family out there, your very being is a sacred pattern. Your journey, your healing, your love, they're all intentional, divine, and part of the great unfolding. So I'd like to thank, Anne Marie for just your wisdom today. It's just so much important information. I can't wait to go back and watch this recording myself because I was like, okay, there's a lot. I need to get some books. I need to study. There's things I need to do. So I love it. So thank you for joining us today. And family, until next time, stay radiant, stay rooted, and keep uncovering the hidden healing all around you. So peace and blessings.